This is Seahawks Stories, 50th Season Edition, presented by Emerald City Athletics.
Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome. This is Seahawks Stories, the 50th Season Edition. You know, you only get to do this one time for the 50th season, so it's great that the Seahawks and all the rest are allowing us to talk so much about it. Here with me today, one of the all-time greats of the Seahawks, Paul Moyer, as a player and as a coach and a broadcaster, now doing the pre- and post-game show, so we see each other every week for Seahawks football. And here's a reminder that broadcasting, as we are from the Seahawks podcast studio, presented by Sony, an official partner of the Seattle Seahawks. Paul, we've already discussed lots going back to, well, we've talked about your playing days before, obviously monumental time during the course of the organization. We'll talk more about that as we go along.
Quick segment.
Quick segment. Mine segment was even quicker, if that helps. But the changes that have occurred, and we've talked about how the one constant through all of this, through now 50 seasons, have been the fans. They're the ones that have been there for all of this. But there have been a number of monumental sort of landmark spots in this franchise organization. The founding of the franchise in 75, the first season of 76, the first time making the playoffs, which was, 83 with your guys, with Chuck Knox and you and Kurt Warner and all the rest. And that ownership group consisting of the Nordstrom family and a number of minority owners. Herman Sarkowski was the managing general partner at the time. He was also one of the owners of the Portland Trail Blazers, a guy whose name gets left out of a lot of these conversations. But he was instrumental in getting the team here at the time, and his connections to the league. And then we come to the period of time where Ken Behring owned the team, and there was a lot of difficulties. We went through head coaches, we went through general managers, we went through quarterbacks like crazy, trying to find just the right one, and used a number of high-round draft choices to do that. And then ultimately trying to move the team, Ken Behring did, and that's when the co-founder of Microsoft, Paul Allen, stepped in, who became ultimately the owner. But when you look back at all those years, what are some of those landmarks that you look to and point at and say, this is really what set this team up, this franchise up for that next step?
Ooh. There's a few. Matter of fact, before I go too far into it, you said something when we first started. You said, "Hi, everybody," and it reminded me of Wayne Cody.
Yeah,
because Wayne used to say, "Hello, everybody."
Yeah.
And Kurt Warner, when my daughter was born, repeated that over and over and over again on film. But those are great memories. Look, let me talk about Paul Allen. The Nordstroms were such great people to work for, and unfortunately, the strike in '87. Them owning Nordstrom at the time, that union, non-union, there were some things there that, they thought, we got to put our emphasis where our money is, and that's Nordstrom, the company. Yeah. And that was disheartening because they were such wonderful people. They were such a great ownership group to work for. They would come in the locker room and you knew they genuinely cared. And they would be there if we won or lost. Yeah. Then Ken Behring came and his son, David Behring, look, nice enough people. That was a tough time in Seahawk history. And now Paul Allen. Here's what I remember about Paul. Paul was just the perfect owner. He's the perfect owner. What were his strengths? Well, one, he had the money to buy the team. Two, he was a mentor. He was a mentor because, to Mike Holmgren. He was definitely a mentor to Pete Carroll, John Schneider. They talk about, look, he would give them some tough love too. But at the same time, he said, look, I pay you guys to run this organization. I may give some of my opinions. I'm going to approve things behind closed doors, but you guys are going to run this organization. And I'll never forget the defining moment for me, the real defining moment. Obviously, hiring Mike Holmgren was big. Dennis Erickson was there. They had about a 2-year, dating before he purchased the team completely. He makes a splash, and so the one thing I think Paul did, great, business, mind, obviously, was he hired good people. He didn't hire Dennis Erickson. He didn't hire that group. So when he took over full time and he brings in Mike Holmgren, who had won a Super Bowl with Green Bay, But the one where I thought, oh man, this guy is really good at what he does. It was when Mike was the president, general manager, head coach. And he said, I'm slow to hire this. I got to hire the right person, but I got to make a change. He wasn't afraid to make changes.
Right.
And he brought in a general manager, say, hey, look, you focus on being a coach. I'm sure Mike didn't like it at the time, but it played out well. Oh, I'm sure of that. We go to a Super Bowl. The second one, and I thought was maybe the biggest, was when he fired Jim Mora. And that was not easy for him.
No.
He didn't want to do it, but he said, it doesn't feel right? It doesn't feel the direction we want to go as an organization. And he fired Jim after 1 year. And I didn't like it either because Paul Allen wasn't someone who fired people. Matter of fact, you go and look in this organization here, I mean, the NASA and Julie Barber and Dave Pearson and they've been here for so long. They hire good people and they keep them for a long time. But when he did that, he thought hard through it, knew he needed to go make another splash, and brought in Pete Carroll and John Schneider and let them work their magic. And so I just went, okay, this guy, he just gets it. He's loyal, but at the same time, if he was willing to make changes that may not be popular at the time, that turned out obviously very popular.
Yeah, I would throw into that group the hiring of Pete and John. Todd Lewicki as well. The decision to bring Todd in,
that was big.
Who kind of cemented the organization, gave John the leeway to make some of those decisions, was that good conduit to the ownership, knew what a great fan experience should be, understood the realm of broadcast and pro sports in a community, and was the man who, as we've talked about in other episodes of this podcast, was the man who said, let's raise every week, every Sunday or Monday or Thursday night, let's raise a flag in honor of our fans, the 12s, and let's have somebody special do it. Let's have, we can bring in some old players like Paul Moyer and Steve Raible, or we can bring in firefighters and educators and people who do great things in the community. And, we can bring in some rock stars on top of that, but honoring the fans every single game. And I thought that was a great move by Paul as well. The things that I remember about Paul was his wanting to help the community. And it was the same reason the Nordstroms bought the team and put together an ownership group of Monty Bean and Howard S. Wright. And again, as I mentioned, Herman Sarkowski. But the Nordstroms were the majority owner of that group. Lynn Himmelman was another of the old ownership group. And remember, they bought the rights, they bought the franchise from the NFL for a grand total of, I think, $14 million was the fee to
enter. That's a good investment, too.
Yeah. Now, a second-string kicker will get $14 million over a couple of year period. So that's what 50 seasons has done as well. But Paul, I thought, brought it back to, because Ken Behring came in and he readily admitted, listen, I want to come up there. And he was a developer in California, Northern California. I want to come up there and I want to build communities, planned communities in Seattle. And this is a good way for me to get into the area, is to buy a football team. And everybody then will obviously know who Ken Behring is, and they might be more willing to listen to our programs. Paul Allen said, I'll do this, but I'm going to do it for the community because this team has been here. The community deserves this franchise. There's a history here. We have great fans, but I'm going to do it by asking the fans to join with me in doing this. And that meant the fans, by passing a tax in the state to help pay for a new stadium, because the Kingdome, as we remember, tiles were falling out of the ceiling.
They had debt still to
and
pay
there was
off.
still debt to pay off on the Kingdome. And he had a whole new vision for what Seahawks football could be in a brand new stadium. And I think the part of the story that local politicians found out in a big hurry was there are owners who will move franchises, as Ken Behring tried to do, and take this team to California. And ultimately, he was forced to come back within weeks, literally, of when he moved everybody to Anaheim. But they came back up here, and then it was a few more years, and then the sale. And then Paul, again, had that foresight of saying, I want the fans to be a partnership. I will cover a large portion of the costs and overruns and buy the team. But to get the stadium built, we need to do this. And it didn't pass by a lot.
Well, I was going to say, it was a make or break vote.
Yes.
And I remember being nervous about it. I thought, obviously Seattle, King County, probably would pass it, but, you never know on those things. But, they had the fans, the majority of the fans were here.
Right.
Eastern Washington, that was going to be a tough sell. Like, why am I paying for this?
Right.
And it wasn't it was a number at the time, but it wasn't a big number. But I think he just wanted, hey, this is our team, the state of Washington's team. What do you remember about you were a big time broadcaster then on there 11 o'clock, me waiting up to see what Steve had to say.
Yeah, and it started out not looking good. The early returns were coming in from Eastern Washington, and those numbers were not positive. And it took till close to the end of the evening before finally it started to edge up toward 50%. I think it was ultimately 51%. I mean, it was not
close.
Some overwhelming number on the vote. But I remember that there was just an amazing amount of joy for those who had helped organize this. And I remember Paul getting on stage and playing guitar. For those folks who didn't know a lot about Paul Allen other than he and Bill Gates started Microsoft, which, on a side note, and Sharon, my bride of 44 years, reminds me of this sometimes,
Congrats.
I had a chance to buy stock in Microsoft in 1982 when they started the company.
Oops.
His mom was a member of the Cairo Radio and Television board, and she said, oh, by the way, my son is starting a little company if anybody's interested. And I thought, well, I'm not big in the stock market. I don't know. And to this day,
you would have owned them.
But that's a whole nother deal. But he was smart enough to understand all of those things, and he was such aside from being so smart in business and incredibly intelligent when it came to foreseeing what technology could be and could do, as evidenced by not only all of his Microsoft products, but look at everything else he's in, the Brain Institute, all the other things that maybe people don't remember about him. But he also loved Jimi Hendrix. He grew up in this town, and he grew up listening to Jimi Hendrix play guitar, and he loved playing guitar. And I remember him playing that night on stage with the band, his band, after the vote came through in a positive way, and we were going to get a new stadium, and the team was going to stay here, and he was going to complete the purchase of the franchise. And it's been nothing but up ever since.
There was kind of my first time, and I say this facetiously, but I go, people care about other things other than sports and the Seahawks, because I was like, well, why wouldn't Bill Gates buy this? Why wouldn't we've got some billionaires here. Paul Allen, though, did love sports. He just didn't love football. He loved basketball, the Portland Trailblazers. They had Bob Whitsitt back then. And when he got the team, Bob was doing kind of the Seahawks and Portland. And, again, Paul Allen was smart enough to realize, all right, this doesn't quite work. I've got to get the pieces right. But man, I was worried. I go, he doesn't love football. He loves basketball. We got to go to a vote here. I just can't imagine the Seahawks not being here.
Yeah. I can't either. Well, after 50 now in the 50th season, I can't imagine that either.
But it was close.
It was very close. It was very close. There were a lot of interesting moments that night. Mike Flood, who has been the head of community affairs here for how many years since Paul bought the team, was a friend of Paul's and was a pilot and very close friends, those guys, and he has been a part of the organization. He also helped with that, get out the vote and to get the referendum passed so that the public would be a part of the total package in building the stadium. And all you have to do now is go down to Lumen Field and see, here is what you got. You got a place that's could be used 300 days a year, not just for football, but for concerts and for all manner of events that they can put in that venue. And every time we go down there during the season, there's a new club, a new way to show the creature comforts to the 12s and everybody else who's there. It's an amazing facility. And the only thing that I would love to see them put in there at someday, if you can find a way to shoehorn it into that footprint, is a Seahawks museum. I would love to see retrospective.
Write that one down. I'll get that one
listen,
down for you.
There's a lady named Sandy Gregory who worked for the Seahawks starting in '76 as in the public relations department, and all the way through to just the last few years worked here for 40 plus years.
Yeah,
an amazing person, and she was the one. She's put that in everybody's ear about we need to have and she's got a bunch of stuff stored away from players who give her stuff and say, here, maybe someday. And I just don't know that it's going to happen just because the footprint is not very big.
They can make it happen. Maybe they build down and dig something out. We build a basement, but I agree. I mean, you go look at Green Bay and some of the storied franchises. Look, obviously land is tougher here. We're a little landlocked along the way. You mentioned something, though, about Paul Allen also, which was really cool. Because, again, I think he was a perfect owner. He was behind the scenes.
Yep.
He was kind of a rock star. Okay.
Yes.
And rock star in that one, he loved music. He meant Jimi Hendrix. In 2005, whenever you go to a Super Bowl, there's always a post-game party that each team, usually it's at the team hotel. Yep. We had it in 2005, 2013. That was an awesome one. 2014. But actually, even 2005, even though we lost, we didn't win. They took that one away, but that's for another story. It was an amazing post-game party, and I remember Paul Allen being up there with his band playing, and they were good.
Oh, they were really good.
I don't know. Again, you're a drummer, so I'm throwing this layup for you to talk about it.
They were terrific. He had a lot of great musicians who were just his buds. Paul Allen, while he could be down to earth, he was also always thinking about a lot of things, way up here in the stratosphere. But when you're, one of the wealthiest men on the planet, you can do things. Your toys are bigger. Your toys are more expensive. But he could get his team, his group, his band, his 4 or 5 guys in the band, because I used to talk to the drummer every so often, and put them on a helicopter, or he'd pick them up here on his yacht, or pick them up in Southern California where his yacht was huge. He had a recording studio in his yacht.
Yeah.
So, and he had a helipad on it, so the guys could come in on a helicopter, or they could meet him at the yacht, and they'd go out there and just jam and record. Now, that's pretty cool.
You have an interesting, obviously, perspective behind the scenes, because Paul was, I would say, shy. Mm-hmm. I mean, he didn't want to be in the forefront of the limelight, here with the Seahawks. But I remember a couple of moments, pictures. And one was, I think, the first time he raised the 12th flag. And I think he was a bit shocked, first of all, going up there and how the crowd reacted to him. Yep. And there was a moment where I go, oh, wow, he really gets this. He gets the love from the fans. That one. And then I don't remember if it was either the NFC Championship game, but it might be when he was holding the Lombardi Trophy in 2013. He's up there, I think, with Pete and John, and he just has this, that moment that you want in life, right? That this is my little baby or my children, and we did this, man. This is so cool. And I think as much as he's done for this community, I mean, look, some of the development in South Lake Union, here at VMAC, which has become, a symbol, as you're on 405 here in Renton. I think that defining moment for him was so cool in that, okay, we just won a Super Bowl for this community, for the 12s. I think he felt that love. Yeah. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. He did. And he understood that, and he understood this community. He's from here. Yeah. His dad was the librarian at the University of Washington. He went to football games at Husky Stadium. It was one of the reasons why, when people ask, well, why isn't there a roof on the stadium? Well, there are a couple of reasons. There's a business reason, and we'll go into that. We can. But the other reason was he spent his falls as a youngster with his dad going to Husky Stadium, which was not covered. And he wanted really to have a grass field and that whole sense of, this was kind of what I remember. Obviously, grass up here isn't great when it comes to football, so we settled on maybe the best kind of artificial surface you can get in a stadium, and they pioneered it around here, and it's been in several iterations of it have been at Lumen Field over the years. And there's the business standpoint, too. It's tougher to sell suites in an indoor stadium than it is an outdoor stadium. That's
Yeah.
a lesser,
point.
because you're already inside. But that was a lesser issue. The big reason why, because Paul really saw this as that kind of, I remember those days when I was young.
Well, do you remember also, they tried to have a dual facility with University of Washington, and Montlake nixed that.
Yeah.
Think about what that would have been like. And I get it. I'm glad that the Seahawks have their own and the Huskies have their own. They're both iconic. But that would have been an unbelievable stadium.
Well, there was some rumors. I don't know if they got to the stage of actual talks, but when the Mariners had built Safeco Field, that then there was talk about making that extendable roof so that it could come all the way over. They talked about the same thing in Kansas City 1,000 years ago when they built Arrowhead and the Royals Stadium back there, Kauffman Stadium. And that kind of never came to pass either. That expense is so huge. And again, the temperatures are pretty temperate here in the Northwest. Yeah, we're going to deal with some rain, but the field is great. Guys play great on it. You don't really notice that. You notice the cold and the wind when you go to Kansas City, the snow in Green Bay and Chicago. You notice that. That's called home field advantage.
Yeah.
So you want that in your favor here. Yeah, that was who Paul Allen was, and all those things that he did. I remember you talked about the party after the Super Bowl win in New York. I come in. We had done a long post game. You guys were there for the same reason. All the post game stuff
fun.
that you did, and then we all go back to that hotel in Jersey City where we still stay, which is great. When we go back to play the Giants, we still stay there. And I remember I had to do some live shots back here to Cairo television. I was still obviously anchoring there at the time. We finally finished everything, and it was time to go to the after party, which had been going for like an hour and a half by the time we got there, maybe longer. And I no more than got to the gate, and you had to show a wristband or something so you could get in. And I start to walk in with my nephew Riley, who did our stats, and Cortez reaches out. I didn't know who it was at first. Reached out and grabbed me, and he said, "Here, somebody wants to say hi." And he pulls me over, and there was an area that was sort of roped off, and it was Paul's area over there. And so it was really cool to see how excited he was for everybody else that we win a Super Bowl. And then he goes up on stage and plays with Tedeschi and Trucks for an hour later in the night. It was terrific. And then we almost couldn't get out the next day on the team plane because of the snow.
Barely
we had to
made it.
de-ice twice.
Barely made it.
To get out of the airport in Jersey.
That again, I'm not to bring back that. I just remember having my family there in New York and thinking this is going to be a lousy place for a Super Bowl. It was incredible. The weather was good. Every pub, and I remember there was the 12s had taken it over.
Yeah,
I mean we had the multiple pubs here. Everybody, Seahawks. We were like celebrities as well, and I just think of Paul Allen. It just, it's weird that now he's passed. I think of, wow, some of the lessons. I didn't know Paul. I met him a couple of times. He wouldn't remember of meeting me. But I remember the stuff I've talked about, just how he mentored, and talking with Pete and John, how he mentored him, how he was behind the scenes. You hire good people. Again, slow to hire, but quick to make changes if need be. I remember, though, when he died, it was another moment. As I go, it was very surreal. I kept thinking, no, I mean, here's one of the richest men in the world. I know, they're saying he's sick. I go, they'll figure it out. And it was that moment I go, oh, man, he's gone. That was a big loss at the time. Just maybe where you were, what you were sharing. I also know, I don't know if you want to share with it, but you had a chance to MC his memorial as well.
Yeah.
So
it was surreal is a good word. He's only 65.
65.
And he had lymphoma and had several bouts with it, but was, for the longest time, it seemed, was either in remission or you can live with lymphoma if you are treated for it periodically. And then all of a sudden he went into the hospital and took a turn for the worse. And literally we were on an away trip, I think. And that's right. We were in London. Thanks, NASA. Our producer here just reminded me. We were in London, and we came back, and he passed. And it was, I mean, you kind of walked around here and everybody thought, oh my gosh, this was the guy who built this building. This was the guy who took this franchise and kept it here. An amazing life. And I was honored to be asked to MC his memorial service at that very same place where we had that big fundraiser that night in the tennis court area and basketball court. So we're in the same place how many years later, and this time remembering him at his passing. And just the breadth and depth of his friendships and the people who were there. There were some people from his Microsoft days. But remember, by this time, he was kind of separated from Microsoft. He was doing his own thing by then. But Bill Gates was there, and Steve Ballmer was there, and some of the other folks, the early folks at Microsoft. And John Schneider and Chuck Arnold are the heads of the Seahawks organization here, and have been and took us to all these great heights. They were there. But also members of the entertainment community and Dan Aykroyd and Harry Shearer and Robbie Robertson and just it was such an interesting group of people that he got to know and that knew him. And again, like you, not well did any of us know him, but I don't know if anybody could really know him well.
Yeah.
As you said, he was a shy guy. He never married, never had children. But he was just such an interesting person, and his mind always was on something new. The Brain Institute. He's the one that actually got the Rock and Roll Museum down at Seattle Center built in honor of his hero, Jimi Hendrix. It's kind of changed now its philosophy a little bit over the years, but he was the one that spearheaded that. And then he had a ship. I think it was the Calypso. It was called, or something like that would go, the Odyssey maybe, but out on the seas and would do undersea research. The things that interested him were just amazing. So it was, and then he could sit down and pull out a guitar and just play like lights out. So he was an interesting guy, and I agree with you. One of the loudest cheers I think we ever heard at Lumen Field was when he got up there to raise the 12 flag, and he had to be sort of pushed into that. He wasn't that guy who wanted to be out there for any of that stuff. He, like you said, he wanted his people that he put in charge, to get the credit for what they had done and let them be the out front people on this. Think of the ownerships around the National Football League today. Somebody once told me when he owned the league, when he owned the team, everybody else, all the owners around the league used to say, well, we all have a boss, don't we? There's always somebody up the next peg, just a little bit richer, just a little bit. Paul was that guy.
Yeah.
He was by far, and yet he was maybe the most hands-off person of all of those ownerships. Compare it to Jerry Jones in Dallas, who is, intimately involved in every decision, oftentimes to the detriment of the franchise. But that wasn't Paul.
Well, and we're very blessed, obviously. Started with the Nordstroms, Paul Allen, thank God for Jody Allen as well. I mean, I think Paul put the value out there, and Jody's passionate about it as well. And you're right, Steve. I go, look, we're in private equity worlds now, right? It's a different group of ownership. We'll see what happens over the next 20 years. It becomes more and more about return on investment, rather than what we can do for our community. But right now we have and continue to have one of the greatest, if not the best, ownership groups in the NFL and maybe in all of North America sports. So we've been pretty fortunate, and you again, the icon, voice of the of the Seahawks.
It just means I've been around for a while. That's all. They can't get rid of me. I'm like a bad penny. It just keeps turning up over and over again. And actually, when you talk about Paul and now Jody in her position as the head of the the trust that runs the team, that owns the team. She had a tough decision to make last year.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that came down to her deciding. She got input from her representatives, from John, from Chuck, from everybody else, and decided it was time that they had to make a decision and make a move and relieve Pete of his duties and move on. And John, to his credit, he knew who he wanted. He knew who he believed this franchise needed. And that was Mike McDonald, and here he is. And we win 9 games last year and just barely missed the playoffs. and has really put in place what I think is a great core, not only of players, but of coaches, and, having a chance to talk with him twice, 3 times a week, just as I did with Pete for 15 years or 12 years, whatever it was. It's so interesting to hear their take on things. And they also know, hey, we've all got a boss. We have to perform. We have to do our jobs. But where else would you want to do it? I mean, really.
Well, I don't think we're going to be a part of the next 50, but it's been one heck of a ride on this first 50, and it's been fun hanging out with you.
Well, brother, you know what they didn't have when we started playing?
What's that?
Your first year was 83.
83?
Okay, my last year
was 82, right?
I retired right before the 82 season.
Okay.
Yeah. So 81 was my last full season. But what we didn't have then was this, and this NFL season. Feel every play, every hit, every moment. Notice how I did that?
Yep.
That's why I'm a pro, buddy. With the Sony 1000 XM5 noise-canceling headphones, the official headphones of the Seattle Seahawks. With premium noise cancellation, you're in the zone. No distractions, just pure football. Whether you're in your living room or on the go, you will never miss a beat with Sony headphones. I go back to the days we were in Japan playing a game against Denver 1,000 years ago. It was 83, 84. It was preseason.
No, that would have been 1990.
Was it that
Yeah, the
late?
reason why my daughter was just born and my wife, Heather, came with us, it was our first time away from our daughter. So, yes.
I didn't think it was that late.
1990. It was the first year after.
Well, all I remember was we were in Tokyo, and I bought what I thought was the greatest, newest, most up-to-date piece of electronics. It's called a Walkman. And you had those goofy little wire headphones that fit, and I don't mean like a little loose wire. I mean they were a hard wire that went over the top of your head, and these little felt pads that stuck on the side of your head. But boy, you could put a little cassette tape in there and listen to Stevie Wonder.
Everybody around you could hear it because there was no noise canceling there.
No. That's why, folks, you got to get you a Sony 1000 XM5 noise canceling headphones.
I have one.
Do you really?
I do. I expect since you've been promoting that we'll get another one.
Well, I would hope. I'm going to have NASA chat with the lovely folks at Sony, and we've got their name on our wall right here in the studio at the Virginia Mason Athletic Complex here, VMAC, in Renton. It has been a treat, my friend, to talk about some of these old days with you. We're going to continue along this line of questioning in our next podcast, so we sure want to have everybody tune in for that one. Again, remember the Seahawks here from Seahawks Broadcast Podcast Studio, and this is all presented by Sony, an official partner of the Seahawks. These are the Seahawks Stories, and we'll talk to you again soon.